In the 8 years I've lived in France, I've seen my fair share of bad tourist behavior, and most of the time it's coming from people who just don't know any better. So in this video, I'm going to share with you my top 3 France travel tips that go a long way in terms of respecting the culture, fitting in, and being perceived positively by the French. So if you don't want to be a clueless tourist who's just unaware of what France is like, keep on watching. Bonjour tout le monde, I'm Diane, the American behind the Living Abroad lifestyle blog, We in France. I've lived out in the Loire Valley of France since 2012, and here on this channel, we talk about everyday French life and beyond. So if you're into that sort of thing, I'd love it if you subscribed. Be sure to hit that bell so you get your notifications and you'll get an alert when I make new videos. And also check out my social media. That's down below. And one more quick thing, I'll have some merch coming to YouTube soon, so stay tuned in a couple of weeks. All right, let's get into it. Absolutely no one expects tourists to speak great French or to know all about French culture. That would be absurd. But what is reasonable is to be aware of cultural norms and then just do your best to be respectful of them. We're visitors after all, so it's just a learning experience and we all make mistakes. Don't worry about it. I've made a ton of them. So on your next trip to France, start it off on the right foot with my top 3 French travel tips based on what I've observed over the years. Even if you're just passing through an area of France for a day or two, knowing about these 3 things goes a long way toward how you're perceived and treated in France. I feel they're the top overarching Paris travel tips that apply to all areas of France in pretty much any situation. I think of them as the golden rules, and yes, I'm taking a hard stance on this because they're that important. The good news is that they're super easy to implement, and keep in mind that if you ignore these 3 tips, you'll most likely have a subpar experience in France. I could almost guarantee that French people will be less than friendly and accommodating toward you if you don't take these travel tips into consideration. And guess what? That's how stereotypes are maintained. That's how they're formed. Things like the French being rude or arrogant. So keep that in mind. All right. Number 1, as tourists, we forget that bonjour is a mandatory word. And I actually wrote an entire blog post on this that I'll link below, but bonjour, hello, is a magic word in France, above all. In some areas of the world, you can get away with starting off an interaction without saying hello. So where you're from, maybe greetings are considered polite, but not mandatory. In France, they are mandatory. Beginning any interaction with the bonjour is as close to mandatory as you'll get, and that's for foreigners, visitors, people who live here, locals, everyone. Foregoing the compulsory bonjour or bonsoir in the evening is not only out of touch with French norms, but it'll communicate to the French that you're lacking in basic manners. And this is one of those travel tips that's easy to nail every time once you know it, because it's easy. Even if you botch the pronunciation and say bonjour, bonjour instead of bonjour, just make a mental note to say it so it becomes automatic. Now, who do you say bonjour to? You say it to everyone you have an exchange with, but just don't hug them. You don't hug to say hi in France. Now, say bonjour before you kick off any interaction. So if you're going to be speaking to another human being, even if it's just a quick question in a store or you're just ordering something from the bakery, you need to say bonjour. Yes, really, it's that important. Now, this does not mean shouting across a restaurant or to a busy bartender with his back turned to you or screaming hello to a security guard, across a supermarket. No, but you say hello to a grocery store employee, the person checking out your groceries, a shopkeeper, market vendors, ticket collectors, the guy you approach on the street for directions. You say hello to everyone you generally greet in the USA. Plus, when you're entering a doctor's office, when you're entering an elevator, when you're in a waiting room, and all that's in a blog post I link below. So yeah. So you might be thinking a little confused, like, Diane, of course I say bonjour. I wasn't raised by wolves. What do you think I am? But depending on where and how you were raised, saying hello first and foremost might seem like common sense. I get it. But hear me out. The difference here about how bonjour is used in France is subtle. And let me give you an example. So in the USA, it's commonplace, just go up to someone in a service position and launch into your request. Maybe not the politest thing, but it's fine. Here's an example. I was back home in Florida visiting family behind an older guy in Publix, and he said to the deli counter woman, give me a ½ pound of ham. And then he was like, give me a ½ pound of Land O'Lakes American cheese, please. Then I was in Starbucks. There was a girl scrolling through her Instagram feed. She's like, I'll take a skim vanilla latte. She might have said please, right? She didn't even look up. Or behind someone at the CVS pharmacy when it was this guy's turn, he's just like, yeah, I'm picking up a prescription for John Doe. So in all of these cases, the employee didn't blink and got right to work. Now, none of these instances I just mentioned would fly in France. Everyone in earshot would think you're majorly rude and maybe not say anything to you, but they sure as heck would think it. And in some cases, I've seen employees just stare back at the person, repeatedly saying, bonjour, bonjour, until they get a little bit of a clue and realize they forgot the obligatory bonjour. So they start again with the magic words. And it's happened to me a few times. I learned my lesson, right? Sometimes, even if you're supposed to say bonjour, it falls by the wayside because you're so caught up in your head trying to remember the sentence you're supposed to say after the bonjour, or you're so enamored by everything French and everything new and the sights and smells and your jet lag that you just forget. It happens. It's okay. We've all been there. But the point is, like any big city, people get away with rudeness all the time. And while it's acceptable in the US, it's not polite, but it's acceptable. It's not acceptable to not say bonjour in France. So don't be rude yourself. And I feel like as foreigners, sometimes we need to step up our game and be better than all of the tourists doing the wrong thing. So now you know. And sure, you could do whatever you want. You could bark orders at people. You could forget your bonjour. In Paris, locals are sadly used to tourists not knowing the rules. But if you've watched this far, it means you're interested in making a good impression. So good on you. You care about these things. And yeah, we'll be friends. And here's the thing about that. This is one of those French travel tips that goes beyond merely being polite. It's not just about being respectful of French culture. In my opinion, it goes toward letting another human being know that they're being seen. So they're not just there to serve others because it's their job or to help you because you're a tourist, So before there's any ask, there's a brief but necessary acknowledgement of, hey, I see you, fellow human. I know you don't have to help me, but I'm starting off by being polite. So let's proceed, please. In effect, that's what you're saying. And one thing to note, bonjour is not an invitation to strike up a personal conversation, and it's not a come on. It's just a necessary part of how you communicate in French. So it's something you say, and it's expected at a bare minimum, and delving into small talk is a matter of discretion. Now, if you'd like to learn a few more polite phrases that'll help you make a good impression, I've written about that as well. So head to the description for that link with a comprehensive French travel phrase post with audio that might also be of interest. But let's move into number 2. All right. So number 2 is tourists forget to make an effort with French, even if you only know 3 words. That effort goes by the wayside. So beyond number 1, saying bonjour, which we just mentioned, there are a few other words that really do make a difference. So au revoir. That means goodbye. If you want to get fancy, merci. Merci is thank you. And if you didn't learn them in your middle school French class, learn them and practice them before you get off the plane. It doesn't matter if you have a horrendous accent. Go ahead and say au revoir, merci. If you're barely understandable, it's the effort here that counts. So do your best to try, even if you think you sound ridiculous. Again, we've all been there. And I feel that what's way more ridiculous than a tourist totally botching pronunciation is if you don't even try at all. And worse, if you just walk up to a French person and say hello or please or thank you in English. I've seen that. It's lazy. Don't do it. And I know it feels weird to bust out your limited French, especially if the person you're talking to speaks English, but do it anyway. And in the name of all things holy, just do your best to learn at least hello, thanks, and please. Okay? Hello is bonjour. Thanks is merci. Please is s'il vous plaît. And then use them often. Everyone's capable of that. Again, forget the accent. Don't be embarrassed. Otherwise, you risk being perceived as someone who's culturally tone deaf, and you'll receive the corresponding service. So my take is if you can do a few simple things to have a better experience, why not? Okay, last one, number 3, is we forget to experience things without making judgment calls. And this is France. It's where things are done the French way. Don't I know it? It's not America. English is not the native language. And outside of big cities, the French really don't speak more than basic English, if at all. So we need to be respectful of the people and the country we're visiting. And that means keep cultural judgments to ourselves and don't audibly criticize the French or at all. After just a limited experience in the country, you'd be surprised what I've heard tourists say, someone loudly proclaiming out in the street, hey, I don't have a big bathroom, actually happened. Or, this bed is tiny, there's no closets. The French are inconveniencing tourists with their stupid store hours and strikes, don't they know? I've heard that. And I've also been in earshot of tourists complaining about French waiters and how they're so rude. after one restaurant experience being in Paris for a day. And guess what? They forgot to say bonjour because of course they did. So really what someone's saying when they exclaim, the hotel room is tiny, it's this hotel room is smaller than what I thought my money would get me back home. Or this restaurant service is super slow. All it means is this restaurant service is super slow compared to what I'm used to back home. So go ahead, notice the differences. I do it often, but try to resist making judgment calls that deem one way of doing something better or worse than the other, and then getting all bent out of shape about it. It's a vacation, right? Part of traveling, I feel, is taking in the experience for all it is and all it's not. And the cultural differences, they're fun. And no matter how uncomfortable they can be, we learn something and we'll probably laugh about it later. I hope. So it is normal to notice the differences and talk about them. It's a fun topic of conversation. Really, you see it all the time on my blog. Culture shock is real. And I remind myself not to make these judgment calls all the time because, it's not normal to expect everything to be like it is at home and then write off France as being, less than, or everyone's arrogant or rude or no one speaks English. Well, it's France. So if you're looking for a replica of your home country just with different scenery, well, why spend all the time and money to go to France? So just clear your mind, be open about it, live the differences, observe, learn, and just experience them. France is nothing like the USA in a lot of ways, and I feel like that's a good thing. How boring would it be if we all experienced the same thing everywhere across the globe? And yeah, I'll be the first to say there are things in France or anywhere that can be maddening, but just use it as a lesson to go with the flow. It's a good exercise. I've chilled out a lot since I moved here. And above all, enjoy your trip to France. And if you'd like some more tips, I've rounded up a whole bunch crowdsourced from my Facebook readers about France travel. So I'll link that down below if you'd like to read a few more. But tell me, have you committed any faux pas in France? And if so, tell me about them. Let me know about any major tips I might have missed that you have for tourists visiting France. Let me know down below in the comments if you enjoyed this video. Give me a thumbs up, subscribe if you're into this sort of content. I'd love to see you back here on We in France soon. Thank you so much, and salut!